Good morning. It's Sunday, July 14th, and this is the Georgia Gang. I'm Russ Spencer in this morning for Lori Geary. Here's a look at some of the stories we'll discuss with our Sunday regulars, Theron Johnson, Phil Kent, and Alexis Scott. We'll look at what fundraising numbers say about the 2020 U.S. Senate race in Georgia and whether the Democrats really have a chance. Another court says the General Assembly doesn't have to be as transparent as everyone else in Georgia government. And should Georgia change the law to allow nonviolent felons to vote sooner? The discussion begins right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
I am Russ Spencer. I'm usually watching this program in my pajamas. It's very good to be with you this morning.
Well, welcome, Russ.
Let's talk about the U.S. Senate race. David Perdue has $5 million in the bank, raised almost $2 million in the last quarter. The only Democrat in the race until this week, Teresa Tomlinson, the former Columbus mayor, raised about $500,000. And now we have the Clarkston mayor, Ted Terry, in the race, a progressive on almost all counts. I'm interested in your opinion about all of them, but before we get to that, the basic question, are the Democrats in play next year? They'd like to take over the Senate, the National Democrats would, the U.S. Senate. Is that realistic?
They could be in play next year in 2020 in this U.S. Senate race if they don't keep racing to the far left. And just as we saw during these announcements, they're talking about, for example, Ted Terry, who got in the race, the mayor of Clarkston, says he's for the Green New Deal. Even Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, says it's impractical. What is he talking about?
He said there were some parts that he was not for.
And then Teresa Tomlinson says, I could be considered a socialist. She said that in an interview with Mother Jones. And Terry is a member of the European, I don't know why he joined the European Socialist Party, but I don't think they're going to be a factor if they keep going to the left. If there's a moderate, centrist, liberal Democrat, then it could be in play with Perdue.
I also think if Perdue continues to go to the extreme right, he could, they could definitely put the state in play.
I think he's a mainstream Republican.
He is not a mainstream. He's a Trump Republican, which is very different from mainstream Republican.
His popularity is great in the state. It's over 50% for Senator Perdue.
Okay, so Theron, what's your opinion? I mean, Tomlinson's numbers, are they going to draw more people into this race because of what seems like an apparent weakness? I mean, one of the Kemp strategists said, you know, $500,000 is good if you're running for state Senate, not U.S. Senate.
Yeah, that was a pretty good quote. Two things. Yes, I think you're going to see people join this U.S. Senate race, not because what I thought was a good fundraising number from the Teresa Tomlinson campaign at a time where the climate is very hostile. A lot of folks are giving to the presidential race. And look, we still got fundraising fatigue from the Stacey Abrams campaign and Brian Kemp. I mean, a lot of Democrats and Republicans gave a lot of money to those folks. But I want to push back a little bit on Phil. Let's not forget, we are in a purple state right now. And if you look at the election results from 2 years ago, and I agree with Phil that Democrats can flip this state. And I do think that this competition is good. You know, we're having a very robust conversation in the party right now. Some of the issues are very progressive. Some of the issues are more moderate. But at the end of the day, I do think that the demographic changes that we've seen in Georgia compound with what we saw with Stacey Abrams and others along the congressional races and the constitutional ticket, how they were able to drive out votes in the metro area and rural areas. I do think Democrats have a shot.
Okay, but Stacey Abrams is not going to be on the ballot. Or do you think she might change her mind?
I don't think she'll change her mind, but she definitely wants to help turn the state blue.
Well, the reason she wasn't on the ballot, Russ, is the fact that even Democratic insiders have told me that her polling was going down on this whining tour, that she didn't win. She refused to concede to Brian Kemp. She keeps attacking Kemp, claims he's illegitimate. I think the moderates and the independents, as we all agree, are key in 2020. Both parties want to have them. I think the Republican Party, a center-right party, is getting those people because, again, of the whining and the far-left positions.
Well, I don't think she's whining at all. I think she's fighting for a fair election and fighting against the voter suppression that's been going on for these last few years by the Republicans in the state.
And it seems clear that she would rather be an executive than a legislator at this point, with her eye potentially on the presidency. But of course, the demographics have changed in Georgia. We saw that in Metro Atlanta. But this is a big state. Can Terry or Tomlinson or Ossoff or Sarah Riggs-Amico, can they win statewide?
They can, and I think a Democrat can win statewide, and I think Georgia will be blue again very soon. But the other thing we got to talk about is what type of campaign will David Perdue run this time? You know, one of the things you got to give him credit for is that he was the original outsider. He coined that phrase before Donald Trump coined the phrase. And so he ran as a true Georgia outsider. So are we going to get the jean jacket in the cotton fields of Georgia, David Perdue? Or, to Alexis' point, are we going to get someone who's going to fully back all of the, not just some, all of the Trump policies that he has been such a deep endorser in Washington? And so I think his people are kind of leaning more towards the outsider. If you look at their response when Ted Terry jumped in, they kind of coined that phrase again. But right. David Perdue knows the state has changed, and you can't run that same exact campaign you ran 6 years ago. It's going to have to be a little bit of a remix there.
Right.
You know, you had the head of the Black Entertainment Television just the other day, Robert Johnson, praise Donald Trump. Why? Because of the economy. Who is linked with this economy and has been very good in cutting regulations and cutting taxes? Senator David Perdue. I just pointed out his popularity has been consistently over 50% as he enters.
Robert Johnson sold BET and took the money and ran.
Well, I know you don't like Robert Johnson, but the point is you can't attack. Well, you don't want to talk about the economy, which is doing better than ever. We all know the statistics, and so I think that's going to be the key in Georgia as well as nationally in 2020.
All right, let's talk about government transparency. A court of appeals voted this week in favor of the General Assembly, saying that the General Assembly does not have to abide by the Open Records Act that it passed that applies to other state agencies and to city and county governments, because it said if they wanted it to apply to them, they would have explicitly said so in the law. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but that sounds a little odd to me. What do you guys think?
Very odd.
Well, I like what Chris McFadden, the Chief Justice, said. I think it should have applied to the General Assembly. I think that they're accountable. They pay taxpayers money. I think it's terrible that I've always thought it's terrible that they're exempt from the open records law and the transparency angle. So I think that I would hope both parties in the legislature, their leadership, would fix this. Now that the court has ruled in such a way, I think they ought to be just as accountable as everyone else.
Well, we've talked a lot on the show about issues that have a legal pathway. I mean, not to bring up the stuff that's been going on with Speaker Ralston, and there's also a political pathway. I think legally what you saw is a judgment that came down and basically said that they are going to continue the law that's in place. But from an optics standpoint and politically, in this new era of transparency, I think you're going to see a robust conversation in this upcoming session to really take another look at it. But legally, the courts rule that it's totally fine for them not to adhere to the transparency law. But in the era of 2019, where transparency is something that all parties want, I think you're going to have to really see more of a conversation about that.
What do you think?
I predict the same, that they'll take up a measure that may protect them somewhat of the transparency, but they'll at least have the appearance of trying to be more transparent.
All right, let's talk about DeKalb property taxes. Some DeKalb homeowners, elderly people in particular, are going to get a tax break this year that they haven't gotten before because of gentrification and skyrocketing property values and this e-host sales tax, this 1% tax that's going into effect. Seems fair that folks who've been living in their home for decades shouldn't be forced out because property values are going up all around them.
That's exactly right, and I'm glad to see that the CEO, Michael Thurman, is pushing this through, and they're to be congratulated for the commission voting for it to roll back or at least not increase the tax assessment so that people can get a tax break. It's a good thing.
What do you think, Phil?
Well, I don't have a problem with gentrification. I do feel bad about neighborhoods and folks who have been there a long time, but I don't think gentrification is going to stop. Neighborhoods keep shifting. That's just the way it is in our economy and with real estate.
But the thing that was so unique about this is that, and as Alexis said, that this is a county where in DeKalb County, taxes are actually going down, and we see places like Fulton, Gwinnett, and Cobb where taxes are going up or have likely going to go up in the very near future. But we know that studies show that one of the ways to end gentrification or to reduce gentrification is to make sure that people can afford to pay their property taxes. Right. So by basically lowering taxes or making them stable will definitely reduce the gentrification. That's not going on in DeKalb County. It's going on all across the United States of America. And then we see some of our white areas where predominantly white people are staying that are areas that are being gentrified and re-gentrified. And it's rapid in Atlanta. So I think this is a big win for the CEO and the commissioners to get this done.
All right, Darren, thanks. Coming up, Georgia's biggest bank decides not to do business with companies that build detention centers on the Mexican border. We'll talk about why.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
SunTrust is the latest bank to announce that it will stop financing companies that run prisons and immigration detention centers. Georgia's biggest bank did not say precisely why, but some of the companies involved accused SunTrust of caving to political pressure stemming from the conditions at detention centers on the border. And of course, there are some ICE detention centers here in Georgia as well. What do we think about SunTrust following the example of JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America?
Several other banks, yeah. I think they just don't want to be associated with the horror that's going on in the borders with the children in cages, parents being detained, separated from their children. And I think it's a smart move by the bank to do that.
Yeah, now the companies involved here say, I want to get it precisely right, they say that this is misleading political activism because their centers don't detain children. What do you think, Phil?
Well, this whole business of what's happening at the border with detention centers has been blown way out of proportion by liberal media types and also Democratic politicians. There's a crisis at the border. If you remember, just 4 months ago, the leading Democrat said that it's a manufactured crisis. That was a lie. And so, but let's go back to what companies are doing here. I think it's a slippery slope for any company. I don't like boycotts from the right or the left. What's going to happen now if we keep going with this politically correct caving into pressure? You're going to have people just trying to go to restaurants or shop or do anything based on politics. That's crazy. I think that's not the America we would want.
Already.
I know they are, and I don't think it's good. And I blame people on the right and the left for trying to foster boycotts and for trying to pressure companies. You know, half of America, we've all heard this, maybe on the right, and half of America maybe more on the left. It's very divisive for the country. I hate that businesses cave into this. Just do business and don't get into politics.
Well, the thing is that you can't separate people from business. This is a people-driven, customer service-driven operation. And so I'm sure, did polling and looked at the people who actually are the recipients of their services, people who bank with their bank, and people who basically probably have an opinion about this. And I think SunTrust is to be commended because this is a bold step. And I think, to say that this situation at the border is being overblown, that's just really laughable. I mean, it's beyond party lines when you're seeing the deplorable conditions that these folks are living into. When you see people dying with their daughter trying to swim to basically get to a better place.
The Democrats waited 4 months before they could fund any humanitarian assistance.
And
why is this happening? It's because of open borders.
When you see that, I think you got to separate the partisanship. The bottom line is that both parties need to do a better job to make sure that we're securing our borders and we make sure that these people don't live in these deplorable situations.
The Republicans were the ones that tried to get humanitarian aid for about 4 or 5 months. Fortunately and thankfully, Nancy Pelosi shut down the socialist wing of her party and joined the Republicans to get the humanitarian aid.
Because your president wanted the wall with the aid.
Correct.
And he wanted
then he dropped that and said, let's do the humanitarian aid. The left still didn't want to do it. And I'll give credit to Nancy Pelosi shutting down the hard left and finally getting humanitarian aid to these people that you cry about.
Well, one of the problems would seem to be that these centers were built to detain men on a short-term basis who were coming over here to work. And now what we're confronted with is families with children. This is a whole new thing. These detention centers were not built for that. So what's the answer?
The answer is they need to stop detaining them
Get
in
rid
the
of the
same
asylum
way.
loophole. This is what's happened.
No.
They know now everyone's
Come on,
asking
Phil.
for asylum. You could have 1 billion people coming in here asking for asylum. Will the Democrats close the asylum loophole? Some people, yes, have legitimate asylum claims, but not all of these people flooding across the border.
Wow.
First of all, these are people, and I think
You don't want to address the asylum loophole.
Phil, listen, don't cut me off every single time I try to make a point.
Address
I don't do that to you.
address
No,
the
you don't.
asylum
You don't tell
loophole.
me what to address. I address what I want to address.
All right, you can spin it any way you
No, I'm
want.
not spinning it. I'm just saying, let me tell you my opinion. I'll let you
Go
you
ahead.
get your opinion, and you don't do that. I think that at the end of the day, there's a humanitarian issue with it, right? And then how you make the detainment center better for living, or how you strengthen the borders. I think this is just a conversation that this president and Congress have got to have, because at a time where that Democrats are going to continue to go to the borders and try to get footage to really show the American people what's going on inside these places. And yeah, there's asylum laws and different things that the president can do and the Congress can do. I just think that this issue within itself, these private companies, SunTrust Bank, taking this bold step is going to put more and more pressure on these politicians to do something about the border.
Of both parties.
I said both parties.
Good.
All right. Well, let's talk more about the intersection of business and politics, or perhaps not. Amazon announced this week that it's going to build a new fulfillment center in Gwinnett County and bring in 1,000 new jobs. Governor Kemp said that this proves, as if it needed to be proven, that Georgia can compete for investment from the biggest and best companies in the world. But there was no mention of politics at all. I mean, whenever there's a conversation about Hollywood, the heartbeat law comes up. Were you surprised at all that that was not brought up at all in the context of Amazon?
I wasn't really surprised because Amazon is about business and making money, just like everybody else is primarily, who is in business. But I also think that they, you know, if it comes up, if it's brought up to them, then they will address it.
I don't think a warehouse has to be a really big political issue. And I think 1,000 jobs where everybody wants 1,000 jobs.
Right.
I will say this, and I think all of us know that area where it's going to be located. That is going to be a traffic nightmare.
Yeah.
We are going to have
Don't go there.
We are going to have to do some infrastructure, and I don't know the actual negotiations. You may know it, but you know where it is, and that's going to be a mess.
But to Russ's point, I think where you're going is that look, this is
sometimes it's an issue, sometimes it's not.
I mean, let's okay, it's 1,000 jobs. You're right. It's something that we all be proud of. But one of the things that this governor and I think other people that he worked with, the local municipalities, I think this was strategically planned, and it was a risk because they had to anticipate that we were going to get some pushback. But when you ever have a major corporation like Amazon moving 1,000 jobs here and they hear really zero mention of the Harvey bill, I think that conversation is evolving. While the legal challenge is still going on, but you didn't hear a lot of pushback from it.
All right, we'll leave it there for the moment. Georgia lawmakers considering a change in the law to allow nonviolent felons to vote when they get out of prison. It could affect hundreds of thousands of people, and we'll talk about it when we come back.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
A panel of Georgia Republican and Democratic senators is considering whether to allow nonviolent felons to vote as soon as they serve their prison time. Current law bars them from the polls until they have paid their fines and finished parole. Some 200,000 people were prevented from voting in 2016 because of that provision. This is a study committee at this point, but what do you think about the idea of giving felons a chance to sort of re-enter society in a more complete way sooner?
I think it's a good idea because it gets them in the mode of participating and get the responsibility for having done what they did, and they paid their debt, and they're maybe in the process of completing it, but I think it's a good idea to get them re-engaged in society.
Phil, what do you think?
Well, currently, you have to go back to get your civil rights, including your voting rights, to the Board of Pardon and Paroles, and the judge has to sign off to it. I like to do this on a case-by-case basis. I don't want to see just a massive jailbreak, you know, for all of these people. Some people are bad criminals. Some people deserve a second chance. So I would take on a case-by-case basis. I think it's a mistake just to have some a blanket law where everybody gets their voting rights back.
But to have a law in place that basically restricts someone who's basically done their time and paid their fines, it's like a modern day poll tax. You know, I believe that if someone has gone to jail for a nonviolent, I stress nonviolent conviction of a felony or a nonviolent misdemeanor, that person, he or she, should be able to basically have their right to vote. Now, this case-by-case basis, I think that's going to be sort of the center of this study committee. And then the thing about it is that if you open this up, then you're going to see greater conversations about, you know, voting rights and also basically people's records being restricted. You know, there's a lot of nonviolent people around here who have committed nonviolent crimes that basically can't get a job. They can't check yes or no on when you're asked on the application, have you been convicted of a crime, and if their license and their records are not restricted. And so I do think that this bipartisan study committee is going to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but I think Georgia is moving along around criminal justice reform, because remember, this is something that Nathan Deal crowned his legacy on, criminal justice reform, and it's something that Governor Kemp wants to do as well.
Right. It is interesting to me that this is a bipartisan study committee. Is there much disagreement between the two parties when it comes to this?
I think there will be. Again, you can still go right now on a case-by-case basis. If you're a nonviolent felon and you've had a good record in jail, generally, and I've seen this, you get your voting rights back.
Yeah, but I kind of pivoted away from voting rights, but also I think there's a confluence between the two as far as being able to get a job as well. But all it is about is reforming the person who has committed a crime and really, as fast as we can, getting them acclimated back to society.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, Maine and Vermont let felons vote while they're in prison. Not going to happen
Maine
in
and
Georgia.
Vermont. I don't think that's going to happen
I
in
don't
Georgia.
think okay, let's talk. This is not really politics, but I just have to get your reaction to this crazy scene on I-285 this week when $175,000 blew out of an armored truck. Less than $5,000 has been returned. You would return the money, wouldn't you?
Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. I mean, that's what I heard when I was growing up as a child. But probably I would not have stopped in the first place. I mean, this was dangerous.
On 285, come on.
Yeah, I would not have stopped. I would have just kept going. But it's pretty crazy. I mean,
I thought I saw a video of you scrounging around for money in the woods.
I don't think so. I
Well,
don't think so.
and there are license plate readers all over the place. Apparently, it is a misdemeanor. Now, obviously, that kind of money, if you take that kind of money, it would be a felony. But under the circumstances, since it was laying out on the road, if you don't return it, supposedly it's a misdemeanor. But what does it say about us that only $5,000 has been returned?
Well, what you saw, Russ, is that an impulsive decision by a lot of folks who it was to the point it was very dangerous to stop. But you guys and the Fox 5 has really basically played this video. So the person who turned in that video, not and people showing people's faces, because beyond the license plate readers, there was also some folks that I've read that were actually walking and they found money, in the trails. And so I do think at the end of the day, you need to return the money. It's a misdemeanor. I think the Dunwoody police got on Fox 5 and said basically, hey, we can see your faces, we can license plate readers, and then I think people are going to start talking. And so, but it was a very, very chaotic
I
scene.
think they should just write it off.
I
as a
agree
loss.
with Theron. I know you like free stuff for everybody, but I agree with you.
Well, I think they should they have insurance on this, so they just write it off. And
They
go,
do.
I
keep
think
going.
those guards are probably been fired. I don't know how a door
I-
flies
I
open
can't
on a
imagine
truck
they
and
wouldn't
money
be. All right.
is unstowed.
Up next, winners and losers. We'll be right back.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
We are back with winners and losers, and Alexis, you're the winner who gets to go first with winners and losers.
All right. Thank you. I want to congratulate the 2019 class of Atlanta Public Schools. They received more than $160 million in scholarships, and they're to be celebrated for doing that. Many of them got what's the scholarship? The state scholarship.
The Hope Scholarship?
Hope Scholarship. Yeah. And so it was very exciting for them.
That's great.
Also, let's recognize the Smyrna mayor, Max
Bacon.
Bacon.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's decided not to seek re-election after being mayor for 34 years. Who knew he had been there that long? Not me, but that's good for him.
And apparently he succeeded his father,
That's
who died
right.
in office, was the mayor back in the night. Imagine
In the
how much
80s.
Smyrna has changed in the last 34
A
years.
great
under
deal.
his
He says
leadership.
they've gone from being the butt of jokes to being a very diverse community of which he's very proud. So that's a good thing.
Excellent. Thanks. Bill?
Well, I would like to make Governor Kemp a winner because he had a very successful trip to South Korea. I think that was a good choice for a trade mission. I talked to him just the other day, and a lot of good things are going to come out of it. We mentioned the Amazon warehouse a few minutes ago. We've got a good economic development team in place, as we all know from the last administration. I've got another winner, and I saw a piece the other day, you may have seen this, where our welfare rolls in Georgia have dropped 2/3 since 2006. That is incredible. It's because of the laws that have been put in place where we're emphasizing more dignity through workfare, is what I like to call it. And I think that the losers have got to be Ted Terry, the mayor of Clarkston, and Teresa Tomlinson, the Democratic candidates for the nomination of the Democratic Party. Some of the wild stuff that they're saying is for open borders, sanctuary cities in Georgia. That's not going to go over with moderates and independents, let alone those who are conservative.
All right, Theron, you.
My first one is going to be Nicholas Blaine Dixon. We all heard about the slain Hall County deputy, and definitely served the community very well. I thought the chief of police and everyone there said very nice things about him. So I want to definitely send my condolences to him and his family.
We all do.
The next winner is definitely going to be the U.S. Supreme Court. for basically saying that we do not need a citizenship question on the census form. Now, this battle is ongoing. President Trump has basically threatened to use executive order, but definitely I think they made the right decision. I also want to give a big shout out to Councilman Matt Westmoreland, who led the effort, which the mayor just signed a smoking ban in public places in the city of Atlanta. This was a very controversial move. This is a young councilman who took a bold step to get some things done. And then also Coco Gauff, who I think, is an Atlanta native. Enjoyed watching her and her tremendous run. And then last winner is definitely going to be the DeKalb County residents, DeKalb County CEO Michael Thurman, and DeKalb County commissioners for basically bringing tax relief to the county, but also passing a budget for the first time in over 20 years, 7-0, unanimous approval of the budget. So that county is definitely moving in the right direction.
That's great.
Okay. My winner this week is Megan Rapinoe. She scored the most goals, was the best player on the best team in the World Cup. Yeah. My loser this week is Megan Rapinoe for having felt a need to use the F word during the public parade in New York City to celebrate the team. I mean, I'm not a prude, but...
And disrespecting the flag, Russ, don't forget that.
The kids are watching. There's reasonable disagreement over whether that's a legitimate protest. That's a political argument. But I think we can all agree, perhaps, that you ought to keep it clean when the kids are watching, when they look up to you the way that they do.
Somebody needs to tell that to the president.
There you go.
And thank you, Russ. You did a great job.
I enjoyed being with you. Thanks very much.
Great.
They'll be back next week.
You're not coming
You'll
back.
be back
Have a great day.
in pajamas.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.